The Reformed Rake by Romance Haven Audiobooks. Chapter 1. The Montrose townhouse, though still stately, wore its age like a faded ball gown, elegant but betraying the years. Juliana Montrose, eldest daughter of Viscount Montrose, stood before her bedroom mirror, her maid's nimble fingers fastening the final pearl at her nape. The reflection that gazed back at her was composed, but her mind was a tangle of nerves and calculation. Tonight's Pennington ball was not merely a social engagement, it was a battlefield. Her family's fortunes, once the envy of their set, had dwindled to a whisper. Her mother's anxious glances and her father's forced cheer had become the rhythm of their days. Juliana knew her duty, to be charming, to be admired, and, if fate allowed, to secure a match that would rescue them all. A knock at the door. Cecily, her younger sister, slipped in, eyes bright with mischief. "You look beautiful, Jules. Mamma says the Marquis of Ashbourne will be there tonight. Imagine, London's most notorious rake in the same room as us." Juliana arched a brow, smoothing the pale blue silk of her gown. "I imagine he'll be far too busy charming half the room to notice a Montrose." Cecily grinned. "Lady Pennington says he's devilishly handsome, and that he once wagered 100 guineas he could make the Duchess of Wexley blush." Juliana's lips twitched. "If that's his greatest accomplishment, I'm not sure we should be impressed." Their mother swept in, her expression pinched with worry. "Girls, the carriage is ready. Cecily, fetch your gloves. Juliana, remember? Tonight, you must be cautious. The Marquis of Ashbourne is not a man to be trifled with. If he asks you to dance, you mustn't encourage him. His reputation," she lowered her voice, "is not fit for polite company." Juliana nodded, but her mind was already racing. She had heard the stories. Tristan, Marquis of Ashbourne, was a man who collected hearts and scandals with equal ease. He was the sort of man who could ruin a girl with a smile and never look back. The ride to the Pennington townhouse was a blur of lamplight and Cecily's chatter. Juliana stared out the window, her thoughts a careful balance of hope and dread. She would not be dazzled. She would not be reckless. The Pennington ball was a riot of colour and sound. Chandeliers blazed overhead, and the air was thick with perfume and anticipation. Juliana moved through the crowd with practiced grace, her mother's warnings echoing in her mind. She danced with a string of eager young men, each more forgettable than the last. She smiled, she curtsied, she listened to their stilted compliments. But her mind wandered, and she found herself scanning the room for a face she had never seen, but already knew by reputation. She spotted him near the card tables, surrounded by admirers. Tristan, Marquis of Ashbourne, was every inch the rake, tall, broad-shouldered, with a careless elegance that set him apart. His dark hair curled at his collar, and his eyes, grey, sharp, and glinting with mischief, missed nothing. He laughed, and the sound was low, wicked, and utterly self-assured. He caught her gaze. For a moment, the world seemed to hush. His smile was slow, knowing, and Juliana felt a prickle of warning at the base of her spine. She looked away, but not before she saw him excuse himself from his circle and begin to cross the room. Her mother appeared at her side, voice tight. "Juliana, remember what I said. If he asks you to dance, you must—" "Miss Montrose," Tristan said, bowing with a flourish that was just this side of mockery. "I believe we have not been introduced. Tristan, Marquis of Ashbourne, at your service." Juliana curtsied, her composure cool. "My lord, I have heard much of you." He grinned, unrepentant. "I hope not all of it was dreadful." She met his gaze, her own eyes steady. Only the most interesting parts. He laughed, the sound genuine and a little dangerous. Would you do me the honor of this dance? Her mother's hand tightened on her arm, but Juliana's pride would not let her retreat. If you wish, my lord. He offered his arm, and she took it, her heart thudding. As they moved onto the floor, Juliana was acutely aware of the eyes upon them, her mother's, the dowager's, the gossip's. Tristan's touch was light, but there was a confidence in it that unsettled her. You dance beautifully, Miss Montrose, he murmured, his gaze never leaving hers. She arched a brow. I suspect you say that to all your partners, my lord. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Only the ones who look as though they might bite. Juliana's lips twitched. And do you enjoy being bitten? He grinned, delighted. Immensely. It's so much more interesting than being adored. She laughed, despite herself, but her guard did not drop. You must find London a very interesting place, then. He spun her expertly, his hand lingering just a moment too long at her waist. It has its moments. Tonight, for instance. Juliana felt the heat of his gaze, the promise in his smile. She was not immune to his charm. No woman could be, but she was determined not to be another conquest. You are very sure of yourself, my lord? He shrugged, unbothered. Confidence is a necessity in my line of work. And what line is that? He leaned in, his breath warm against her ear. Professional scoundrel. It's a family tradition. She laughed, the sound bright and sharp. I shall have to be on my guard then. He met her gaze, and for a moment something serious flickered in his eyes. I hope you will. It would be a shame if you were too easily won. The music ended, and Tristan bowed over her hand, his lips brushing her glove. Thank you, Miss Montrose. I hope this will not be our last. She withdrew her hand, her composure intact. That depends, my lord. I am not in the habit of repeating my mistakes. He smiled, slow and wicked. Then I shall have to work very hard to become an exception. As he walked away, Juliana felt the eyes of the room upon her. Her mother hurried to her side, her voice a frantic whisper. Juliana, what were you thinking? You mustn't encourage him. If people talk... Juliana turned, her expression serene. Let them talk, Mama. I have done nothing wrong. Her mother's eyes darted anxiously. You must be careful. A single misstep, and... I know, Juliana said softly. I know what's at stake. She watched Tristan disappear into the crowd, her heart a confusing mix of exhilaration and dread. She had danced with the devil, and she had survived. But as the night wore on and the music faded, she could not shake the feeling that something had begun, a game, a challenge, a spark that would not be easily extinguished. As the Montrose carriage rattled home through the sleeping city, Juliana pressed her forehead to the window, the night air cool against her skin. She was not a fool. She would not be swept away by a charming smile and a wicked reputation. But for the first time in a long while, she felt alive. And that, she knew, was the most dangerous thing of all. Chapter 2. The morning after the Pennington ball, the Montrose household was abuzz with the usual post-event rituals. Cecily's excited retelling of every detail, Lady Montrose's anxious perusal of the morning's invitations, and Juliana's quiet retreat to the library, seeking a moment's peace among the scent of old leather and dust. She had not slept well. The memory of her waltz with the Marquis of Ashbourne lingered, not as a flutter in her heart, but as a puzzle in her mind. She had seen the way he smiled at other women, the practiced tilt of his head, the glint of mischief in his eyes. It was his trade, she supposed, to charm and disarm. She would not be the first to mistake a rake's attention for something meaningful, and she was determined not to be the next. She was halfway through a letter to her cousin in Bath, when the butler appeared at the door, his expression carefully neutral. "Miss Montrose, you have a caller. Lord Blackwood requests a few moments of your time in the morning room." Juliana blinked, surprised. She had not expected callers so early, and certainly not one of Lord Blackwood's stature. She set aside her letter, smoothed her skirts, and followed the butler down the hall, her mind racing through the little she knew of Victor LaSalle, Marquess of Blackwood. He was a fixture in society, always impeccably dressed, always just a little apart from the crowd. She had seen him at the ball, of course, but only from a distance, a tall, composed figure with a gaze that seemed to miss nothing. The morning room was flooded with pale light, the windows thrown open to the garden. Victor stood by the mantel, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp. He turned as she entered, offering a bow that was perfectly correct, yet somehow managed to feel like a challenge. "Miss Montrose," he said, his voice smooth as polished marble. "Thank you for receiving me on such short notice." Juliana curtsied, her composure steady. "Lord Blackwood, I hope you will forgive the informality of the hour. We are not accustomed to such early visits." He smiled, a small, knowing curve of his lips. "I find the morning is the best time for conversation. The city is quieter, and one's thoughts are less crowded." She gestured for him to sit, taking the chair opposite. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Victor settled into his seat, crossing one leg over the other with practiced ease. "I wished to offer my compliments on your performance at the Pennington ball. You danced with remarkable grace, Miss Montrose. It is not every young lady who can hold her own in such a crowd." Juliana inclined her head, her tone polite but guarded. "You are too kind, my lord. I assure you, I was merely doing my best not to step on anyone's toes." He laughed, a low, measured sound. "You underestimate yourself. I observed you last night. One could hardly help it. You seemed unmoved by the spectacle. Most young ladies are eager to be seen, to be admired. You, I think, were content to watch." She met his gaze, searching for the meaning behind his words. "I find it more interesting to observe than to be observed, Lord Blackwood. There is much to learn, if one pays attention." His eyes glinted with approval. Or was it calculation? "Indeed. And did you learn anything of note?" Juliana considered him for a moment, then smiled. "Only that the most interesting people are often the ones who say the least." Victor's smile deepened, but his eyes remained cool. "A wise observation. I confess I am often accused of being too reserved, but I find that listening is a far more useful skill than talking." She tilted her head, curiosity piqued despite herself. "And what did you hear last night, my lord?" He paused, as if weighing how much to reveal. "I heard many things. That the Penningtons' new chef is a disaster, that Lady Wexley's diamonds are paste, and that the Marquess of Ashbourne is as charming as ever." Juliana's lips twitched. "He does have a reputation for charm." Victor's gaze sharpened, just for a moment. "He does. I saw you dance with him." She felt a flicker of annoyance at being so closely observed, but kept her tone light. "It was only a dance, my lord. I suspect he would have danced with the potted palms, had they been available." Victor laughed, the sound genuine this time. "Perhaps, but I think you underestimate your own appeal, Miss Montrose." She looked away, unwilling to be drawn into a game she did not fully understand. "I am not so easily flattered, Lord Blackwood." He inclined his head, accepting the rebuff with grace. "That is precisely what makes you interesting." A brief silence settled between them, filled only by the distant chirp of birds in the garden. Juliana studied Victor, noting the careful way he held himself, the way his eyes never quite softened, even when he smiled. There was something about him, something watchful, as if he were always calculating the next move. He rose, smoothing his coat. "I will not take more of your morning, Miss Montrose. I simply wish to make your acquaintance properly. I hope we shall see more of each other this season." She stood as well, offering a polite smile. "I am sure we shall, my lord. London is a small world, after all." He bowed, his eyes lingering on her face. "Indeed it is. Until next time, Miss Montrose." As the butler showed him out, Juliana returned to the window, watching Victor's carriage disappear down the street. She could not quite decide what to make of him. Polite, attentive, and yet something else, something she could not name. She turned back to her letter, determined to put both men from her mind. But as her pen hovered over the page, she found herself wondering what, exactly, Lord Blackwood had come to see, and what, if anything, he intended to do next. Victor descended the steps of the Montrose townhouse, the morning sun glinting off the polished brass of his waiting carriage. He paused at the curb, glancing back at the elegant facade, a faint smile playing at his lips. He had seen the way Juliana Montrose had danced with Ashbourne, how she had laughed but not surrendered, how she had met the infamous Rake's charm with wit and caution. She was not a fool, nor was she easily dazzled. That, Victor thought, made her all the more useful. He settled into the carriage, tapping his gloved fingers against the window as the horses set off. The city rolled by in a blur of stone and sunlight, but Victor's mind was already working, quietly, methodically. He had not come to Grosvenor Square merely to pay a polite call. No, he had come to see for himself what had so clearly caught Ashbourne's eye. Juliana Montrose was clever, poised, and, most importantly, vulnerable. The Montrose family's fortunes were no secret, and desperation made people malleable. Victor allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. He would watch and wait, and when the time was right, he would act. For now, the game had only just begun. Chapter 3. White's was thick with the scent of tobacco and the low hum of masculine laughter. The club's panelled walls, lined with oil portraits and the trophies of 100 wagers, seemed to close in around Tristan as he nursed a glass of brandy. The fire crackled in the grate, but he felt no warmth. He had always hated his birthday. It was approaching again, as it did every year, with the same relentless certainty. The city would soon be awash in spring, the season in full swing, and somewhere in the back of his mind, a small, wounded boy would still be begging to see the sea. He remembered the day with a clarity that never dulled. Restless, insistent, his head full of stories about the ocean's wild majesty. He had pleaded with his parents for weeks, and at last they had relented. The journey was to be a birthday treat, a carriage ride to Brighton, a picnic on the sand, a glimpse of the endless blue horizon. But the sky had darkened as they left London, clouds rolling in with unnatural speed. Rain lashed the windows, and the horses grew skittish. His mother had tried to soothe him with a song, her voice trembling as the carriage rocked and shuddered. Then came the roar of water, the sudden, violent surge as the river burst its banks. The carriage was swept away, tumbling, spinning, his parents' screams lost in the storm. He had survived. They had not. Tristan stared into his glass, the amber liquid catching the firelight. He could still hear the echo of his own childish voice. If only I hadn't asked. If only I hadn't wanted. Every year, the guilt returned, sharp as broken glass. He had learned, in the years since, to bury it beneath laughter and scandal, to become the man everyone expected, charming, reckless, untouchable. But the ache never left. A familiar voice cut through his reverie. Ashbourne, I thought I might find you here, hiding from the world. Tristan looked up to see Victor LaSalle, Marquess of Blackwood, standing at his elbow. Victor was impeccably dressed, his dark hair perfectly arranged, his expression unreadable. Tristan hadn't seen him in months, not since the last time their paths had crossed at a house party in Kent, a night that had ended with too much wine and too many words left unsaid. Blackwood, Tristan drawled, forcing a smile. To what do I owe the pleasure? Come to challenge me to a game of cards, or simply to gloat over your latest winnings? Victor's lips curved in a polite, humourless smile. Neither, I assure you. I was merely passing by and thought I'd pay my respects. It's been some time. Tristan gestured to the empty chair across from him. Sit then. I could use the distraction. Victor obliged, signalling to a passing footman for a glass of port. For a moment, they sat in companionable silence, the sounds of the club swirling around them. Tristan watched Victor over the rim of his glass, wondering what game he was playing. Their history was complicated. Rivalry, resentment, and the lingering shadow of a woman who had never truly belonged to either of them. Victor broke the silence first. I saw you at the Pennington ball last night. You seemed in good spirits. Tristan shrugged, swirling the brandy in his glass. Balls are all the same, aren't they? Too much noise. Too many people pretending to be something they're not. Some would say the same of gentlemen's clubs, Victor replied, his tone mild. Tristan grinned, though it didn't reach his eyes. At least here, the pretense is honest? Victor's gaze sharpened, just for a moment. You danced with Miss Montrose. Tristan's hand stilled. He kept his expression neutral, but his mind flickered back to the waltz, the way Juliana had met his banter with wit, the way she had not melted beneath his charm. I did. She's a remarkable dancer. Victor's smile was thin. She's more than that, I think. Intelligent, composed, not easily impressed. Tristan inclined his head, conceding the point. She's certainly not like the others. Victor leaned back, studying him. You seemed taken with her. Tristan laughed, the sound brittle. You give me too much credit, Blackwood. One dance does not a romance make. Perhaps not, Victor said, his voice soft. But I wonder, do you intend to see her again? Tristan hesitated, the question hanging between them. He thought of Juliana's clear grey eyes, the way she had looked at him. Curious, but cautious. He had felt something stir, something he had not expected. But he knew better than to trust it. He was not the sort of man who deserved a woman like her, not after everything. I doubt she'd welcome the attention, he said at last, forcing a careless shrug. Her mother looked ready to faint at the very idea. Victor's eyes narrowed, just a fraction. You surprise me, Ashbourne. I would have thought you'd relish the challenge. Tristan's smile was slow, self-mocking. I've had enough challenges to last a lifetime. Victor's gaze lingered on him, searching for something. You know, there was a time when you never turned down a dare. Tristan's jaw tightened, but he kept his tone light. That was a long time ago. Victor's lips curled in a faint, enigmatic smile. Perhaps. Or perhaps you're simply waiting for the right one. He rose, finishing his port in a single swallow. Well, I won't keep you from your brooding. Enjoy your brandy, Ashbourne. And do let me know if you decide to attend Lady Harrington's musicale. I hear Miss Montrose will be there. With a final nod, Victor strode away, his footsteps echoing on the polished floor. Tristan watched him go, the old unease settling in his chest. He had no intention of pursuing Juliana Montrose. He had nothing to offer her but trouble and regret. And yet, as he sat alone in the flickering firelight, he could not quite banish the memory of her laughter, or the way she had looked at him, not with adoration, but with something far more dangerous. Understanding. He drained his glass, the taste of brandy sharp on his tongue, and told himself it was better this way. He was a rake, after all, and rakes did not believe in second chances. Chapter 4. The Harrington townhouse was ablaze with candlelight, the air thick with the scent of lilies and the low hum of anticipation. Lady Harrington's musicals were legendary, an invitation coveted by every ambitious mother and every eligible bachelor in London. Tonight, the drawing room was transformed into a miniature concert hall, with gilded chairs arranged in neat rows and a gleaming pianoforte at the front, waiting to be played by Lady Harrington's prodigiously talented niece. Juliana Montrose sat beside her mother, her gloved hands folded primly in her lap. She wore a gown of pale green silk, the colour chosen by her mother for its supposed effect on her complexion. The room was stifling, the press of bodies and the heat of so many candles making her long for the cool night air. She listened as the first notes of a Mozart sonata drifted through the room, but her mind wandered, restless and uneasy. Victor LaSalle, Marquess of Blackwood, was seated just 2 rows ahead, his profile sharp and elegant in the candlelight. He had greeted Juliana and her mother with perfect courtesy upon their arrival, his compliments measured and precise. Now, as the music swelled, he turned in his seat, catching Juliana's eye with a smile that was both polite and proprietary. Her mother leaned in, her voice a whisper. "He is a most attentive gentleman, Juliana. You would do well to encourage him." Juliana kept her gaze fixed on the pianoforte. "He is very kind, Mamma." "Kindness is not to be dismissed," Lady Montrose murmured. "Nor is a marquessate. The Blackwoods are an old family, and Victor is well respected. He would make an excellent match." Juliana bit back a sigh. She knew her mother's hopes, felt the weight of them pressing down with every glance, every whispered encouragement. Victor was everything a suitor ought to be: wealthy, titled, impeccably mannered. And yet, as she watched him, she felt nothing but a polite indifference. His conversation was always correct, his compliments always appropriate. There was no spark, no sense of being truly seen. After the first set, Victor made his way to their row, bowing over Juliana's hand with practiced grace. "Miss Montrose, I hope you are enjoying the performance?" "It is lovely, my lord," Juliana replied, her smile polite. He leaned in, lowering his voice. "I confess, I find these gatherings rather tedious. Too much music, not enough conversation. Would you care to walk with me in the gallery? The paintings are said to be quite remarkable." Before Juliana could answer, her mother interjected, her tone eager. "What a delightful idea, Lord Blackwood. Juliana, do go. I am sure Lady Harrington will not object." Juliana hesitated, but Victor was already offering his arm. She took it, allowing herself to be led from the crowded drawing room into the quieter, cooler gallery. The walls were lined with landscapes and portraits, the hush of the corridor a welcome relief after the stifling press of the musical. Victor guided her to a painting of a wind-swept moor, his expression thoughtful. "Do you enjoy art, Miss Montrose?" "I do," Juliana replied, studying the painting. "Though I confess, I prefer the real thing. Paintings are lovely, but they cannot capture the feel of the wind or the scent of the heather." He smiled, but there was calculation in his eyes. "You are a woman of discernment. I admire that." Juliana inclined her head, unsure how to respond. She felt as though she were being examined, weighed, and measured for some purpose she could not quite discern. Victor continued, his tone light. "I hope you will allow me to call on you, Miss Montrose. I find our conversations most stimulating." She offered a polite smile, but her heart was not in it. "You are very kind, my lord." He seemed about to say more, but a group of guests entered the gallery, their laughter echoing off the marble floors. Juliana seized the opportunity to excuse herself, murmuring something about needing a glass of water. Victor bowed, his eyes lingering on her as she slipped away. She made her way through the corridors, her steps quickening as she reached the terrace doors. The night air was cool and bracing, a balm after the heat and noise inside. She stepped out onto the stone terrace, drawing a deep breath, her shoulders relaxing for the first time all evening. She wandered to the edge of the garden, the moonlight silvering the leaves and casting long shadows across the lawn. The city's distant rumble was softened by the hedges and the gentle trickle of a fountain. Juliana closed her eyes, letting the quiet wash over her. A soft footfall behind her made her turn. Tristan, Marquis of Ashbourne, stood at the edge of the terrace, his silhouette framed by the open doors. He paused, as if surprised to find someone else seeking refuge from the crowd. "Miss Montrose," he said, offering a small, apologetic smile. "I hope I'm not disturbing your solitude." Juliana shook her head, her voice gentle. "Not at all, my lord. I was only escaping the musicale for a moment. It's rather overwhelming inside." He nodded, glancing back toward the house. "I confess, I've never quite understood the appeal of these gatherings. I always seem to end up outside, wondering if anyone would notice if I simply disappeared." She smiled, a little more at ease. "I suspect you'd be missed, my lord. You have a reputation for liveliness." He laughed, the sound low and self-deprecating. "That's one way to put it. I suppose I'm not very good at sitting still and listening to sonatas." Juliana glanced at him, her curiosity piqued. "And what are you good at, Lord Ashbourne?" He considered her question, his expression thoughtful. "I'm not entirely sure. I suppose I'm still trying to figure that out." She found herself smiling, surprised by his candor. "That's a rather honest answer." He shrugged, looking a little sheepish. "Honesty is easier in the dark, I think. There's less to hide behind." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, the night air cool and fragrant around them. Juliana felt the tension of the evening ease, replaced by a quiet curiosity. She wondered if his charm was as effortless as it seemed, or if it was a shield, carefully constructed. Tristan broke the silence, his tone light. "Do you often escape to gardens at musicales, Miss Montrose?" She laughed softly. "Only when the music is particularly long, or when the company is particularly dull." He grinned, his eyes glinting with amusement. I hope I'm not included in that assessment. She shook her head, her cheeks warming. Not tonight, at least. He looked at her then, really looked, and for a moment Juliana felt as though the world had narrowed to just the two of them, standing in the moonlit garden, uncertain and a little breathless. But the moment passed, and Tristan stepped back, his smile returning. I should let you return before your absence is noticed. I wouldn't want to be the cause of any scandal. Juliana inclined her head, her voice soft. Thank you, my lord, for the company. He bowed, a touch more formal than before. The pleasure was mine, Miss Montrose. She watched him disappear into the shadows, her heart beating a little faster than before. She told herself it was nothing, just a conversation, just a moment. But as she made her way back inside, she found herself thinking of Tristan's quiet honesty, and wondering if there was more to the notorious Marquis than met the eye. And in the darkness, Tristan paused beneath the branches of a chestnut tree, replaying the conversation in his mind. He had meant to keep his distance, to be nothing more than polite. But something about Juliana Montrose unsettled him. Her wit, her composure, the way she looked at him as though she saw past the mask. He shook his head, chiding himself for his foolishness. He was not the sort of man a woman like her should trust. And yet, as he slipped back into the warmth and noise of the house, he could not help but hope he might see her again. Chapter 5. The morning was brisk, the sky a pale, cloudless blue, as Juliana's carriage rattled through the narrow streets of St. Giles. She had insisted on making the journey herself, much to her mother's dismay. It's hardly the place for a young lady of your standing, Juliana. But Juliana had been unmoved. The orphanage on Rose Lane had long been a cause dear to her heart, and she had spent the better part of the week gathering donations, baskets of bread, bolts of cloth, and a small purse of coins she'd managed to squirrel away from her pin money. The orphanage itself was a squat, cheerful building, its brickwork softened by ivy and the laughter of children spilling from the open windows. Juliana stepped down from the carriage, her arms full of parcels, and was immediately greeted by Mrs. Pritchard, the matron, a stout, bustling woman with a voice that could command an army. Miss Montrose, what a pleasure, my dear. The children have been asking after you all week. Juliana smiled, handing over the parcels. I hope these will be of some use, Mrs. Pritchard, and I brought a new book for the schoolroom. Fairy tales this time. Mrs. Pritchard beamed. You're an angel, miss. Come in, come in. The little ones are in the garden, and the older boys are at their lessons. Juliana followed her through the narrow hallways, the air thick with the scent of baking bread and chalk dust. She paused at the doorway to the schoolroom, her heart warming at the sight of a dozen children hunched over their slates, tongues poking from the corners of their mouths in concentration. But it was the figure at the front of the room that made her pause. A tall man, coat discarded, sleeves rolled up, chalk in hand. He was bent over a boy's shoulder, murmuring encouragement, his dark hair falling into his eyes. Tristan. For a moment, Juliana could only stare, her mind struggling to reconcile the notorious Marquis of Ashbourne with the man before her, patient, gentle, utterly absorbed in the task at hand. He looked up, caught her gaze, and for a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Miss Montrose, he said at last, his voice a little rough. I didn't expect to see you here. Juliana found her composure, offering a tentative smile. Nor I you, my lord. Are you teaching? He straightened, brushing chalk from his hands. I try. I'm not sure I'm much good at it, but the boys are kind enough not to say so. One of the children, a freckled girl with a gap-toothed grin, looked up from her slate. "He's very good, miss. He brings us sweets too." Tristan's ears reddened. "That's supposed to be a secret, Molly." Juliana laughed, the sound light and genuine. "Your secret is safe with me, I promise." Mrs. Pritchard bustled in, arms full of parcels. "Miss Montrose, would you mind helping me in the kitchen? The bread's nearly done, and the little ones are clamouring for a story." Juliana nodded, but before she left, she glanced back at Tristan. "Will you be staying long, my lord?" He hesitated, then smiled. "I suppose I could be persuaded." She followed Mrs. Pritchard to the kitchen, her mind whirling. She had never imagined Tristan Ashbourne in such a place, so at ease, so unguarded. It was as though she had stumbled upon a secret, one he had not meant to share. Juliana found Tristan sitting on a low stone wall beneath a budding chestnut tree, a half-circle of children at his feet. He was in the midst of a story, something about a pirate captain and a treasure map gone awry. His voice was animated, his hands sketching wild shapes in the air, and the children hung on every word. When he finished, the children erupted in applause, and one small boy threw his arms around Tristan's waist before scampering off to join the others for lunch. Tristan looked up, surprised to see Juliana watching him. For a moment, they simply regarded each other, the air between them charged with something new and unspoken. She approached, her smile tentative. "You're quite the storyteller, Tristan." He gave a sheepish shrug, brushing dust from his trousers. "I'm not sure they care about the story so much as the sweets I bribe them with." Juliana sat beside him, folding her hands in her lap. "You're too modest. I've never seen them so rapt. I think you might have missed your calling." He grinned, but there was a flicker of embarrassment in his eyes. "I doubt the House of Lords would approve of a marquess who moonlights as a pirate." She laughed, the sound light and genuine. "Perhaps not, but I think it suits you." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, watching the children chase each other across the patchy grass. The orphanage garden was a world apart from the glittering ballrooms of Mayfair. Here, the air was filled with laughter and the scent of fresh bread, not gossip and perfume. Juliana glanced at him, curiosity getting the better of her. "How did you come to be involved here, if you don't mind my asking?" Tristan hesitated, his gaze fixed on the children. "It's not a very interesting story." She tilted her head, her voice gentle. "I'd like to hear it, if you're willing to share." He was quiet for a long moment, then spoke, his voice low. "I lost my parents when I was a boy. There was an accident. After that, well, I know what it's like to feel alone. To wonder if anyone in the world remembers you exist." Juliana's breath caught. She reached out, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "I'm so sorry, Tristan." He shook his head, offering a small, grateful smile. "It was a long time ago, but when I first came to London as a young man, I stumbled across this place. I started helping out, at first just with money, then with time. It felt right, like I could do something that mattered, even if it was only a little." She studied him, her admiration clear. "You've done more than a little. Mrs. Pritchard speaks of you as if you're a guardian angel." He laughed, a little awkwardly. "I assure you I'm nothing of the sort. I just understand what these children are facing, and I suppose I want to give them something I didn't have." Juliana was silent, her heart twisting with empathy. She saw now that the man before her was not just the notorious rake of society gossip, but someone shaped by loss and longing, someone who had chosen kindness in the face of pain. "Thank you for telling me," she said softly. "I won't betray your confidence." He looked at her, his expression open and vulnerable. "I know you won't. That's why I told you." A comfortable silence settled between them, the kind that only exists between people who are beginning to trust each other. Juliana found herself wanting to know more about his childhood, his dreams, the things that made him laugh and the things that kept him awake at night. She smiled, a little shyly. "I'm glad we keep meeting like this. It feels different, somehow. More real than anything else this season." He nodded, his eyes warm. "It does. And if we're to keep running into each other in unlikely places, perhaps we should dispense with titles. When we're alone, at least." She grinned, her cheeks flushing. "I'd like that. Tristan." He returned her smile, the tension in his shoulders easing. "Juliana." They sat together, watching the children play, the world around them fading into the background. For the first time, Juliana felt as though she was truly seeing him, not the rake, not the Marquis, but the man beneath. When the bell rang for the children's meal, Tristan stood and offered her his hand. She took it, their fingers lingering just a moment longer than necessary. "Will you come again?" he asked, his voice hopeful. She squeezed his hand, her answer unspoken but clear. As they walked back toward the orphanage, side by side, Juliana felt a quiet joy settle in her chest. She had come to Rose Lane expecting nothing more than a morning's charity. Instead, she had found a friend, and perhaps the beginning of something she dared not yet name. Chapter 6. The Montrose drawing room was awash in late afternoon sunlight, the golden rays glinting off the silver tea service and the polished wood of the pianoforte. Juliana sat with her hands folded in her lap, her mother beside her, both of them awaiting their guest. Her father, Viscount Montrose, paced by the window, glancing at the clock with the air of a man who had waited for good fortune too long to risk missing it now. When Victor LaSalle, Marquess of Blackwood, was announced, Lady Montrose's face lit with hope. Victor entered with the confidence of a man who knew his worth, bowing with perfect formality. "Lord Blackwood, what a pleasure," Lady Montrose greeted, her voice warm. "Do join us for tea." Victor accepted, settling into the armchair across from Juliana. He was all elegance and composure, his gaze lingering on her just long enough to be noticed, but not long enough to be improper. After the usual pleasantries, weather, the latest news from Bath, the merits of Lady Harrington's musicale, Victor set down his teacup and turned to Viscount Montrose. "My lord, Lady Montrose, I hope you will forgive my directness. I have come today with a purpose. I wish to make my intentions clear regarding your daughter." Juliana's heart thudded, but she kept her expression serene. Her father's eyes widened, and her mother's hand fluttered to her chest. "Your intentions, Lord Blackwood?" Victor inclined his head. "I would be honoured to court Miss Montrose, with the hope that, in time, she might accept my offer of marriage." Lady Montrose's eyes shone with unshed tears. "You do us a great honour, my lord. Juliana is, well, she is our pride and joy." Viscount Montrose cleared his throat, his voice thick. "We would be delighted, Lord Blackwood. Delighted." Juliana managed a polite smile, her mind spinning. She had known, of course, that her parents hoped for such a match. Victor was everything they could wish for, titled, wealthy, respected. And yet, as she met his gaze, she felt only a polite detachment, as though she were watching her own life from a distance. Victor turned to her, his tone gentle. "Miss Montrose, I hope you will not find my attentions unwelcome." She dipped her head, her voice steady. "You do me great honour, my lord." He smiled, satisfied. "There is to be a ball tomorrow evening at the home of Lord and Lady Sutherland. May I hope for the pleasure of a dance?" "Of course," Juliana replied, her smile practiced. "I shall save you one." Victor rose, bowing to her parents. "Thank you for your hospitality. I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow evening." As he left, Lady Montrose clasped Juliana's hands, her eyes shining. "Oh, my dear, what a wonderful prospect. Lord Blackwood is everything we could have hoped for." Juliana forced a smile, her heart heavy. She knew her duty, but she could not quiet the small, stubborn voice inside her that whispered of something more. The Sutherland ball was a glittering affair, the grand house ablaze with candlelight, and the strains of a lively quadrille echoing through the marble halls. Juliana moved through the crowd with practiced grace, her mother at her side, accepting compliments and invitations with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Victor found her near the refreshment table, his manner attentive, but never overbearing. "Miss Montrose, may I claim that dance you promised me?" She nodded, allowing him to lead her onto the floor. The music swelled, and they moved through the steps with practiced ease. Victor's conversation was pleasant, his compliments well chosen, but Juliana felt as though she were dancing with a shadow, present but insubstantial. After the dance, Lady Montrose appeared, her face alight with pride. "You two look so well together. I dare say you are the handsomest couple in the room." Victor smiled, bowing over Juliana's hand. "Your daughter is a most accomplished partner, Lady Montrose." Juliana felt the walls closing in, the press of expectations suffocating. She excused herself, murmuring something about needing air, and slipped away into the cool night. The gardens were quiet, the moonlight casting silver patterns on the gravel paths. Juliana wandered deeper into the gardens, the cool air a balm against her heated cheeks. She paused beneath a rose arbor, breathing in the scent of night-blooming jasmine, and tried to steady her thoughts. The ball, the expectations, Victor's careful attentions, it all pressed in on her, stifling and relentless. A soft footfall on the gravel made her turn. Tristan stood a few paces away, his dark hair tousled, his expression caught somewhere between surprise and delight. "We really must stop meeting like this, Miss Montrose," he said, his voice low and teasing. She couldn't help but smile, the tension in her chest easing. "I was about to say the same, Lord Ashbourne. If we're not careful, people will start to think we're plotting something." He stepped closer, hands tucked behind his back in a gesture that was both casual and oddly vulnerable. "Perhaps we are. Or perhaps we're simply the only two people in London who find these affairs insufferable." She laughed, the sound soft in the hush of the garden. "You do have a talent for finding me when I most need an escape." He tilted his head, studying her. "Or perhaps you have a talent for slipping away when you need to breathe." She looked at him, really looked, and saw the hint of uncertainty beneath his charm. "Do you often escape to gardens, Lord Ashbourne?" He shrugged, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "Only when the company inside is less interesting than the company out here." She arched a brow, her tone playful. "And am I to assume I am the more interesting company tonight?" He met her gaze, his eyes suddenly serious. "You are always the most interesting company, Juliana." The use of her name sent a shiver down her spine. She hesitated, then said quietly, "We agreed on first names, didn't we? When we're alone." He smiled, softer now. We did. Tristan, then. They walked together along the winding path, their shoulders nearly brushing. The conversation turned to lighter things: childhood mischief, favourite books, the absurdities of London society. Juliana found herself laughing, truly laughing, the sound echoing in the quiet night. Tristan glanced at her, his expression thoughtful. You know, I never expected to find someone who could make me forget myself. Not even for a moment. She looked away, her cheeks warming. You have a reputation, Tristan. I'd be a fool not to be cautious. He stopped, turning to face her. I know what people say about me. Most of it is true, or was. But with you, He broke off, searching her face. I don't want to be that man. Not tonight. She studied him, her heart pounding. Then who do you want to be? He reached out, hesitating, then brushed a stray curl from her cheek. His touch was gentle, reverent. Someone worthy of this moment. The air between them crackled, charged with anticipation. Juliana's breath caught as he leaned in, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Instead, she closed the distance, her lips meeting his in a kiss that was soft at first, tentative, questioning, then deepening as the dam broke and months of longing spilled over. His hands cupped her face, her fingers tangled in his lapel. The world fell away, leaving only the two of them, the taste of each other, the heat and hunger and wonder of it all. A sudden burst of laughter from the far side of the garden jolted them apart. Juliana pressed a hand to her lips, her eyes wide with shock and delight. Tristan's chest rose and fell with unsteady breaths, his gaze locked on hers. We should, she began, but he was already nodding, a crooked grin on his lips. Yes, before we're discovered. They slipped through the shadows, hearts racing, and re-entered the ballroom from separate doors, each carrying the memory of that kiss like a secret flame. For the rest of the night, Juliana avoided Tristan's gaze, her mind spinning with what had passed between them. She danced, she smiled, she played the dutiful daughter. But nothing could erase the feel of his lips on hers, or the knowledge that something had changed, irrevocably, wonderfully, between them. And across the room, Tristan watched her, his own heart unsteady, knowing that he would never be the same. Chapter 7. The house was silent, save for the faint ticking of the clock in the hallway and the distant creak of old timbers settling for the night. Juliana sat at her dressing table, brushing out her hair, the moonlight spilling across the floor in a pale, silvery pool. Her nightgown was soft against her skin, the lace at her cuffs brushing her wrists as she set the brush aside and gazed at her reflection. She should have been exhausted after the Southerntherland ball, but her mind was restless, her thoughts circling back again and again to the garden, to the way Tristan's lips had felt on hers, warm, searching, and somehow both thrilling and terrifying. She pressed her fingers to her mouth, as if she could still feel the imprint of his kiss. A soft breeze stirred the curtains at her window, and she rose to close them, pausing to look out at the garden below. The moon hung low, bathing the hedges and flower beds in ghostly light. She let her mind wander, replaying the evening's events, the way her heart had leapt when she'd seen Tristan waiting for her in the shadows. A sudden noise, a faint scrape, the rustle of leaves, made her stiffen. She peered into the darkness, her heart thudding. For a moment, she saw nothing. Then, as her eyes adjusted, a figure emerged from the shadows, climbing with surprising agility onto the narrow balcony outside her window. She gasped, stepping back. "Who's there?" The figure straightened, and the moonlight caught his face. Tristan. He grinned, a little breathless, as he swung himself over the balustrade and landed lightly on the stone. "Good evening, Juliana. Or is it morning already?" She stared at him, torn between outrage and laughter. "Tristan, are you mad? What are you doing here?" He leaned against the window frame, his eyes glinting with mischief and something softer. "I could ask you the same. You're awake at an ungodly hour, looking far too lovely for a woman who claims to be tired." She tried to look stern, but the corners of her mouth betrayed her. "You're incorrigible. Do you make a habit of climbing into young ladies' bedrooms at night?" He chuckled, shaking his head. "You give me far too much credit. I assure you this is a first. I'm not nearly as practiced as you might think." She arched a brow, folding her arms. "Given your reputation, I find that difficult to believe." He stepped inside, careful to keep his voice low. "My reputation is mostly invention, I'm afraid. I've never had reason to risk my neck, or my dignity, like this before." She watched him, her heart pounding as he took in the room, the delicate wallpaper, the neat row of books on her nightstand, the faint scent of lavender. His gaze lingered on her, on the way her hair tumbled over her shoulders, the moonlight catching the gold in its dark waves. He cleared his throat, suddenly awkward. "I couldn't sleep. Not after tonight. I kept thinking about, well, about you, about us." She felt her cheeks warm, but she held his gaze. "And what, precisely, did you hope to accomplish by risking both our reputations?" He sobered, his eyes earnest. "I don't know. I just needed to see you, to know if what happened in the garden was real, or if I'd imagined it." She hesitated, her fingers twisting in the fabric of her nightgown. "I don't know what I feel, Tristan. I only know that I haven't been able to think of anything else." He smiled, softer now, and took a step closer. "You're different, Juliana. I know you don't believe me. Not yet. But you are. I've never met anyone who makes me forget myself the way you do." She looked up at him, her eyes wide and uncertain. "You say that now, but I wonder if you'll say the same tomorrow." He reached out, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered, tracing the curve of her cheek. "I will. I promise." They stood in silence, the world narrowing to just the two of them, the moonlight and the hush of the sleeping house. Juliana's breath caught as Tristan leaned in, his lips brushing hers in a kiss that was slow, deliberate, and achingly sweet. There was no rush, no desperation, only the quiet certainty of two people discovering something new and precious. He pulled back, searching her face. "I should go before I'm discovered, and forced to make an honest woman of you on the spot." She laughed, the sound soft and breathless. "You'd scandalize the entire neighborhood." He grinned, but there was a seriousness in his eyes now. "I don't want to ruin you, Juliana. That's not why I'm here. I just needed to see you, to know that you're real." She reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "I'm real, and so are you." He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "I'll see you again. I promise." He slipped out onto the balcony, pausing to look back at her one last time. "Good night, Juliana." She watched as he disappeared into the shadows, her heart racing. She closed the window, her fingers trembling, and pressed her forehead to the cool glass. The night was silent once more, but everything had changed. She climbed into bed, pulling the covers up to her chin, and let herself remember the feel of his lips, the warmth of his hand, the promise in his eyes. Whatever tomorrow brought, she knew one thing for certain: she would never be able to forget this night. Chapter 8. 2 days passed, and with each hour, Juliana's anticipation curdled into uncertainty. She had replayed the memory of Tristan's midnight visit so many times that it began to feel like a dream, one conjured by moonlight and longing, destined to fade with the dawn. She told herself she was being foolish, that a man like Tristan Ashbourne was not to be relied upon, but the ache in her chest would not be soothed. She tried to distract herself with the usual routines, reading in the morning room, helping Cecily with her embroidery, even enduring her mother's endless discussions of Victor's virtues. But nothing could quiet the restless questions that circled in her mind. Had she imagined the sincerity in Tristan's eyes? Had she misread the warmth in his touch? Or was she simply another name in a long list of conquests, a pleasant diversion soon forgotten? On the third afternoon, as a light rain pattered against the windows, the butler appeared in the drawing room, his expression carefully neutral. "The Marquess of Ashbourne, my lady." Juliana's heart leapt, then stilled. She rose, smoothing her skirts, and tried to compose herself as Tristan entered the room. He was impeccably dressed, but there was a nervous energy about him, a tension in his jaw that belied his usual easy confidence. Lady Montrose's eyes narrowed, but she managed a gracious smile. "Lord Ashbourne, what a surprise. To what do we owe the pleasure?" Tristan bowed, his gaze flickering to Juliana before settling on her parents. "I hope you will forgive my intrusion, Lady Montrose, Viscount Montrose. I have come to make my intentions known. I wish to court your daughter, with your permission." The silence that followed was thick with astonishment. Viscount Montrose cleared his throat, his expression wary. "That is unexpected, my lord?" Lady Montrose's smile was brittle. "We are, of course, honoured by your interest, but you must understand, our daughter's happiness is of the utmost importance to us." Tristan nodded, his voice steady. "I understand, my lady. I assure you my intentions are sincere. I would never do anything to compromise Miss Montrose's reputation or well-being." He turned to Juliana, his eyes softening. "If you are willing, I would like to invite you on an outing tomorrow. There is an exhibition at the Royal Academy I think you might enjoy." Juliana's cheeks warmed, but she met his gaze with a small, genuine smile. "I would like that very much, my lord." Tristan smiled, then reached into his coat and produced a small, carefully wrapped parcel. "I brought you something. I hope you don't find it presumptuous." She accepted the package, unwrapping it to reveal a slim volume of poetry. Wordsworth, her favourite, with a pressed violet tucked between the pages. She looked up, surprised and touched. "How did you know?" He shrugged, a little sheepish. "You mentioned it once, at the musical. I remembered." Lady Montrose's lips pressed into a thin line, but she could not object without seeming ungracious. "How thoughtful, Lord Ashbourne." Tristan bowed again. "Thank you for receiving me. I will call for you at 11 tomorrow, if that is agreeable." Viscount Montrose nodded, his tone reserved. "Very well, my lord. We shall expect you." As Tristan took his leave, Juliana caught his eye, and in that brief glance all her doubts melted away. He had come. He had kept his promise. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the rain swept away by a brisk spring wind. Juliana dressed with care, choosing a gown of soft blue muslin and a matching bonnet. Her mother fussed over every detail, but Juliana barely heard her, her mind already racing ahead to the day's possibilities. Tristan arrived promptly, his carriage gleaming and his manner unusually formal. He helped her inside, and as the horses set off, they sat in companionable silence, the city rolling past in a blur of sunlight and shadows. The Royal Academy was bustling, the galleries filled with the hum of conversation and the scent of oil paint. Tristan offered his arm, and together they wandered from room to room, pausing before landscapes and portraits, discussing the merits of each with a mixture of seriousness and laughter. Juliana found herself relaxing, the awkwardness of their last meeting melting away. Tristan was attentive, but never overbearing, his wit sharp, but never cruel. He listened to her opinions, challenged her ideas, and made her feel, perhaps for the first time, that she was truly seen. They paused before a painting of a windswept moor, the sky dark with storm clouds. Juliana studied it, her brow furrowed. It's beautiful, but there's something lonely about it. Tristan nodded, his gaze distant. Sometimes beauty and loneliness go hand in hand. She glanced at him, sensing the weight behind his words. You're not as people say, you know. Not really. He smiled, but there was a sadness in it. People see what they want to see. It's easier that way. They moved on, the conversation turning to lighter things, childhood adventures, favourite books, the absurdities of London society. Juliana found herself laughing more freely than she had in months, the weight of expectation lifting with every step. After the exhibition, they strolled through the gardens, the air fresh and sweet with the scent of blooming lilacs. Tristan paused beneath a flowering tree, his expression suddenly serious. Juliana, he said quietly, I need you to understand something. A life with me will not be easy. I have baggage, scandals, mistakes, things I wish I could change. I know I'm not worthy of you, but if you let me, I will do my best to be. She looked at him, her heart full. You're wrong, Tristan. You're more than worthy. You're kind and brave and honest. I don't want perfection. I want you. He reached for her hand, his fingers warm and steady. You have no idea what that means to me. She smiled, squeezing his hand. Perhaps you'll show me. They walked on, side by side, the garden path winding beneath a canopy of lilacs. Juliana listened to the easy cadence of Tristan's voice, the gentle humour in his stories, the sincerity in his eyes. She felt the world narrowing to just the two of them, the rest of London fading into a blur of sunlight and birdsong. As they paused beneath a flowering tree, Juliana glanced at Tristan, at the man who had surprised her at every turn, who had shown her kindness and vulnerability where she least expected it. She felt her heart flutter, a sensation both exhilarating and terrifying. She realized, with a clarity that left her breathless, that she was falling for him. Not the rake, not the Marquess, but the man who had quietly, steadily, become the centre of her world. And as they continued their walk, Juliana knew that nothing would ever be quite the same. Chapter 9. The Marchmont's ballroom was a riot of colour and sound, the air thick with the scent of roses and beeswax, the laughter of the tonne rising above the strains of the orchestra. Juliana moved through the crowd with practised poise, her mother's hand resting lightly on her arm, her senses sharpened by the knowledge that both Tristan and Victor were present. The room seemed to pulse with anticipation, as if everyone sensed that something was about to happen. She had danced twice already, once with Victor, who was all smooth compliments and careful attention, and once with Tristan, whose touch at her waist had sent a thrill through her that she could not quite hide. She felt the eyes of the room on her, the subtle glances, the whispered speculation. Two marquesses, both vying for the hand of the same woman. Such things did not go unnoticed in London. As the music faded, Juliana excused herself from a circle of acquaintances and made her way toward the refreshment table, needing a moment to collect her thoughts. She was pouring herself a glass of lemonade when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Miss Montrose, you look radiant this evening." She turned to find Victor at her elbow, his smile perfectly polite, his eyes sharp. "Thank you, Lord Blackwood. The Marchmonts have outdone themselves, haven't they?" He inclined his head, but his gaze flickered past her, and Juliana followed it to where Tristan stood near the French doors, deep in conversation with Lord Sutherland. There was a tension in Victor's posture, a barely concealed edge beneath his civility. "May I have the next dance?" Victor asked, his tone light but insistent. Juliana hesitated, but before she could answer, Tristan appeared at her side, his expression unreadable. "Forgive me, Blackwood, but I believe Miss Montrose promised this dance to me." Victor's smile tightened. "Did she? I must have misunderstood." Tristan's eyes met Victor's, and for a moment the air between them crackled with unspoken challenge. "It's an easy mistake to make." Juliana glanced between them, her heart pounding. She could feel the attention of those nearby, the subtle shift in conversation as people sensed the undercurrent of rivalry. Victor stepped closer, his voice low. "You're playing a dangerous game, Ashbourne. I wonder if you even know what you want." Tristan's jaw tightened. "I know exactly what I want, and I don't need your approval to pursue it." Victor's gaze flickered to Juliana, then back to Tristan. "You've always been good at taking what you want, haven't you? Even when it belongs to someone else. Or have you forgotten Lady Arabella?" Tristan's eyes flashed, but his voice remained steady. "This isn't about the past, Blackwood." Victor's lips curled in a faint, cold smile. "Isn't it? I wonder if Miss Montrose knows how easily you tire of your amusements." Juliana felt the blood drain from her face. She looked at Tristan, searching his expression for some sign of reassurance. But he was staring at Victor, his fists clenched at his sides. The tension was palpable, but before it could escalate, Juliana stepped between them, her voice calm but firm. "Gentlemen, I thank you both for your attention, but I find I am suddenly quite fatigued. Mamma, would you mind if we left?" Lady Montrose, who had been hovering nearby, immediately took her daughter's arm. "Of course, my dear. I think we have had quite enough excitement for one evening." As they made their way through the crowd, Juliana could feel the eyes following them, the whispers already beginning to circulate. She kept her head high, her expression serene, but inside she was trembling. The carriage ride home was silent at first, the only sound the clatter of hooves on the cobblestones. At last, Lady Montrose spoke, her tone gentle but firm. "Juliana, you must be careful. Both Lord Blackwood and Lord Ashbourne are men of consequence, but you cannot allow yourself to be caught between them. You must choose what is best for you, and for our family." Juliana stared out the window, her thoughts a tangle of confusion and longing. She knew her mother was right, but her heart refused to be so easily guided. She thought of Tristan's wounded pride, Victor's cold anger, and the way the room had seemed to shrink around her as the two men faced off. As the carriage rolled through the quiet streets, Juliana pressed her forehead to the glass, wishing for clarity, for certainty, for some sign of what her future should be. But all she could see was the reflection of her own uncertain eyes, and the knowledge that the choice before her would change everything. Chapter 10. The morning after the Marchmont's ball dawned grey and heavy, the sky threatening rain. Juliana sat in the morning room, her embroidery forgotten in her lap, her mind still tangled with the memory of the previous night. The confrontation between Tristan and Victor replayed in her thoughts, each word and glance echoing with meaning she could not quite decipher. She was startled from her reverie by the butler's discreet cough. "Lord Blackwood, to see you, Miss Montrose." Juliana's heart gave a small, uncertain leap. She rose, smoothing her skirts, and composed herself as Victor was shown in. He was impeccably dressed, as always, but there was a tension in his posture, a careful restraint in his smile. "Good morning, Miss Montrose," he said, bowing. "I hope I am not intruding." "Not at all, my lord," Juliana replied, gesturing for him to sit. "Would you care for some tea?" He accepted, and for a few moments they spoke of inconsequential things: the weather, the latest news from Bath, the success of the Marchmont's ball. But beneath the surface, Juliana sensed a current of unease, as if Victor were waiting for the right moment to speak his mind. At last, he set his teacup aside and turned to her, his expression grave. "Juliana, forgive me for being so direct, but I feel I must speak plainly. I know you are a woman of sense and discernment, and I would not insult you with half-truths or evasions." She met his gaze, her heart beating faster. "Of course, my lord. You may speak freely." He hesitated, then continued, his voice low and tinged with something raw. "You must have noticed the tension between Ashbourne and myself. I do not wish to cause you distress, but I cannot stand by and watch you be misled." Juliana's breath caught. "You mean Tristan?" Victor nodded, his eyes darkening. "I know he has made an impression on you. He is skilled at that, at making women feel as though they are the only person in the world. But you must understand, Juliana, that his attentions are rarely sincere. He has a history of carelessness, of leaving broken hearts in his wake." She looked away, her fingers twisting in her lap. "People change, Victor. Perhaps he is not the man he once was." Victor's lips tightened, and for a moment his composure slipped, revealing something wounded beneath. "Perhaps. But you deserve to know the truth. There is something you do not know, something about Lady Arabella." Juliana's eyes widened. She had heard the name before, whispered in drawing rooms and at the edges of conversations, always in connection with Tristan. What happened? Victor's expression softened, and for a moment Juliana saw not the polished Marquis, but a man genuinely wounded by the past. "Arabella and I grew up together. She was my dearest friend, my confidant. After her husband died, I thought perhaps we might have a future together. I cared for her deeply, more than I can say." He paused, his jaw tightening. But then Ashbourne arrived. He swept into her life with all his charm and careless promises. Arabella was dazzled. How could she not be? He has a way of making a woman feel as though she is the only one in the world. She forgot everyone else, including me. I watched as he courted her, as she fell under his spell. And then, just as quickly, he lost interest. He left her heartbroken, humiliated. She left London soon after, and I have not seen her since. Juliana was silent for a long moment, her brow furrowed. "That is a sad story, Victor. But are you certain it happened as you believe? Sometimes, when we care for someone, it is easy to see what we wish to see." Victor's eyes flashed, his pride pricked. "You think I am inventing this? I assure you, Juliana, I know what I saw. I know what he is capable of." She met his gaze, her own steady and searching. "I do not doubt your pain, Victor. But I have come to know Tristan, at least a little. He does not seem the monster you describe." Victor's mouth twisted in a bitter smile. "That is his greatest talent. He is a master of masks. I only hope you see the truth before it is too late." He leaned forward, his voice urgent. "Juliana, I care for you. I would not forgive myself if I did not warn you. Please, promise me you will be careful." She withdrew her hand, her voice gentle but firm. "Thank you for telling me, Victor. I will consider what you have said." He nodded, rising to his feet. "That is all I ask. I hope, in time, you will see that my concern is genuine." He bowed, and with a final, searching look, took his leave. Juliana sat in the quiet room, her heart heavy. She stared at the rain streaking the windows, her mind a storm of doubt and longing. She did not know what to believe, or whom to trust. All she knew was that the choice before her was growing more complicated with every passing day, and that her heart, once so certain, was now more uncertain than ever. Chapter 11. The rain had finally ceased, leaving the city washed and glistening beneath a pale, uncertain sun. Juliana sat at her writing desk, Victor's words echoing in her mind, refusing to be silenced by reason or hope. She had lain awake half the night, turning over every detail, every glance, every rumour she'd ever heard about Lady Arabella and Tristan. The story Victor told did not fit with the man she was coming to know, nor with the woman she remembered from distant, glittering assemblies. There were too many shadows, too many secrets. By mid-morning, Juliana's resolve had hardened. She would not be content with half-truths and whispered accusations. If she was to give her heart, she would do so, with her eyes open. She summoned her maid, dressed with care, and ordered the carriage to Lady Arabella's former residence in Mayfair. The house was a grand, sombre edifice, its windows shuttered against the world. Juliana's knock was answered by a wary housekeeper, her face pinched with suspicion. "I'm here to inquire after Lady Arabella," Juliana said, her voice gentle but firm. "I mean her no harm. I only wish to understand what happened before she left London." The housekeeper's lips pressed into a thin line. "Her ladyship is not at home, miss. She's been gone these many months." "I know," Juliana replied, "but I hoped someone here might speak with me. I am a friend, and I believe she was wronged by more than just gossip." The housekeeper hesitated, glancing over her shoulder as if expecting to be reprimanded. "There's nothing for you here, miss. Best you be on your way." But as Juliana turned to leave, a soft voice called from the shadows of the corridor. "Wait." A young maid, her apron stained and her eyes red-rimmed, stepped forward. "If you truly wish to know, miss, I'll tell you what I can. Her ladyship was kind to me, and I don't like the lies that have been told." The housekeeper shot the girl a warning look, but the maid pressed on, her voice trembling. "Lady Arabella was with child when she left. It was her late husband's, not Lord Ashbourne's. She never looked at another man, not truly. But her husband, he was cruel. He hurt her often. We all knew, but he made sure no one outside these walls ever suspected. He was a monster, miss. A real monster." Juliana's breath caught. Why did no one help her? The maid's eyes filled with tears. "We tried, in our way. But he was powerful, and she was so alone. The night he died, well, there was talk among the staff. Some say it was an accident, but others—" She lowered her voice. "Others say her ladyship had no choice, that she defended herself, and that Lord Ashbourne helped her make it look like an accident. He was the only one who ever stood up to the master. He saved her, in a way. Juliana's mind reeled. And Victor. Did he know any of this? The maid shook her head. He was her friend, but she never told him. She didn't want him to see her as ruined or to carry her shame. She left to protect herself and the child. Juliana pressed the girl's hand in gratitude. Thank you. You've helped more than you know. She left the house with her heart pounding, the truth burning in her chest. The story Victor believed was a lie, a shadow of the real tragedy. She had to tell him. He deserved to know, even if it shattered his illusions. The carriage ride to Victor's London townhouse was a blur. The city seemed to close in around her, the clatter of hooves and the shouts of street vendors fading into the background as she rehearsed what she would say. She was shown into a formal parlour, its dark wood and heavy drapes a stark contrast to the bright, uncertain hope she carried with her. Victor entered a few minutes later, his expression surprised and wary. Juliana, I wasn't expecting you. She rose, smoothing her skirts, and met his gaze. I needed to speak with you. It's important. He gestured for her to sit, but remained standing, his posture tense. Is this about Ashbourne? It's about Lady Arabella, Juliana said quietly. I went to her house this morning. I spoke with someone who knew her well. Victor's jaw tightened. I see. And what did you learn? Juliana hesitated, searching for the right words. Victor, Lady Arabella was pregnant when she left London. The child was her late husband's. For a moment, Victor simply stared at her, as if he could not comprehend what she was saying. Then his face darkened, his eyes flashing with a storm of emotion. Hurt, anger, disbelief. So that's it. That's why she left. Ashbourne got her with child and then abandoned her, just as I said. No, Victor, you don't understand. Juliana tried to explain, but he was already striding past her, his jaw set, his fists clenched. I should have known, he muttered, his voice shaking with rage. He will answer for this. Victor, wait! Juliana called, rising to follow him, but he was gone, his footsteps echoing down the marble hallway. She stood in the parlour, her heart pounding, the weight of the truth heavy on her shoulders. She had tried to bring peace, to untangle the web of lies and pain, but instead she had set in motion a confrontation that could destroy them all. As she left Victor's house, the sky overhead was darkening once more, the promise of another storm on the horizon. She climbed into her carriage, her mind racing with all she had learned and all she had failed to say. The city seemed to close in around her, the future suddenly uncertain and fraught with danger. Chapter 12. The club was a sanctuary for London's most privileged men, a place where secrets were traded as easily as cards and reputations were made or ruined over a glass of brandy. The air was thick with the scent of tobacco and the low hum of conversation, punctuated by the occasional burst of laughter or the clink of crystal. Tristan sat in his usual corner, the shadows half hiding his face, a glass of whiskey untouched before him. He had come here for solitude, for the comfort of routine. But tonight, even the familiar hush seemed restless, as if the walls themselves anticipated trouble. He was lost in thought, the memory of Juliana's eyes and the echo of Victor's accusations circling in his mind. When the doors burst open with a force that silenced the room, Victor LaSalle strode in, his coat unbuttoned, his face flushed with anger and purpose. The hush that fell was immediate and electric. Even the most jaded clubman sensed the promise of spectacle. Tristan looked up, his expression unreadable as Victor crossed the room in long, furious strides. The crowd parted for him, whispers trailing in his wake. A few men exchanged knowing glances. Everyone had heard the rumors, the whispers of rivalry and romance, but no one had expected the drama to play out so publicly. Victor stopped at Tristan's table, his voice ringing out, clear and cold. "Ashbourne, I believe you and I have unfinished business." Tristan rose slowly, his movements measured, his eyes never leaving Victor's. "If you wish to make a scene, Blackwood, I suggest you choose your words carefully. This is not the place for theatrics." Victor's hands clenched at his sides. "You know exactly why I'm here. You think you can ruin lives and walk away unscathed. You think you can seduce any woman you please and leave nothing but wreckage behind." A ripple of interest ran through the club. Men leaned forward, eager for the drama, their own games forgotten. The air was thick with anticipation, the tension almost palpable. Tristan's jaw tightened. "If you have a grievance, state it plainly." Victor's voice shook with fury, but there was pain beneath it, old and raw. "Lady Arabella, you got her with child and then abandoned her. That's why she left London, isn't it? You destroyed her, just as you're trying to destroy Juliana now." A collective gasp swept the room. Tristan's face remained impassive, but his eyes darkened. He did not confirm or deny, and the silence that followed was heavy with implication. Tristan's voice was low, controlled. "You know nothing of what happened between Arabella and me, and as for Juliana, she is not yours to defend." Victor's lips curled in a sneer. "No, she isn't. But she deserves better than you. She deserves a man who would never let her name be dragged through the mud, who would never make her the subject of gossip and scandal." The crowd was murmuring now, the tension in the room palpable. Someone called for the men to take it outside, but neither Victor nor Tristan moved. Victor's voice dropped, cold and cutting. "You're a coward, Ashbourne. You hide behind your charm and your title, but you're nothing but a scoundrel. If you have any honor left, you'll meet me tomorrow morning at dawn, Hyde Park. Pistols, just the two of us. And our seconds." A hush fell. Tristan's eyes met Victor's, and for a long moment neither man looked away. "So be it," Tristan said quietly. "I'll be there?" Victor nodded once, sharply, and turned on his heel, pushing through the crowd. The club erupted in a flurry of speculation and excitement, wagers already being placed, reputations weighed and measured in the smoky air. Tristan remained standing, his hands clenched at his sides, the weight of the coming dawn pressing down on him. He knew what was at stake. His honor, Juliana's future, the truth that could never be spoken aloud. As the crowd buzzed around him, Tristan finished his drink in a single swallow, the burn of the brandy a poor match for the fire in his chest. He left the club without another word, the eyes of London's most powerful men following him into the night. Outside, the city was silent, the first hint of morning glimmering on the horizon. Tristan drew a long breath, steeling himself for what was to come. Tomorrow, everything would change. Chapter 13. The city was hushed beneath a velvet sky, the moon a pale sentinel above the rooftops. In the Montrose house, all was still, save for Juliana, who lay awake in her bed, the events of the past days swirling through her mind. She had learned so much, and yet so little felt certain. The truth about Lady Arabella, the pain in Victor's eyes, the way Tristan's touch lingered on her skin long after he was gone. Each thought pressed upon her, heavy and insistent. She was just drifting into uneasy sleep when a soft sound at her window startled her. She sat up, heart pounding, and saw a familiar silhouette slip onto her balcony. The moonlight caught the line of his jaw, the tousle of his hair. Tristan. He tapped lightly on the glass, and she hurried to let him in, her breath catching as he stepped into her room. He looked tired, shadows beneath his eyes, but when he saw her, his expression softened. "Juliana," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "Forgive me. I had to see you." She closed the window behind him, her heart racing. "You're mad, Tristan. If anyone saw you—" He smiled, a little crookedly. "I know, but I couldn't stay away. Not tonight." She reached for his hand, drawing him into the room. "What's happened? You look troubled." He hesitated, searching her face as if memorizing every detail. "I just needed to be with you, for a little while. I needed to remember what it feels like to be happy." She led him to sit beside her on the edge of the bed, the intimacy of the moment making her cheeks flush. For a long moment, they simply sat together, hands entwined, the silence between them full of unspoken words. At last, Juliana spoke, her voice gentle. "I went to Lady Arabella's house. I spoke with one of her maids. She told me the truth about what happened, about her husband, the abuse, the child, about you helping her." Tristan's shoulders tensed, and he looked away, his jaw tight. "I never wanted you to know that part of my life. It's not a story for polite company." She squeezed his hand. "I want to know. I want to understand you, Tristan. All of you." He drew a shaky breath, his voice low. "Arabella's husband was a monster. He hurt her in ways I can't even speak of. I met her at a party, and I saw the bruises. She tried to hide them, but I knew. I confronted him once, and he threatened to ruin her, to ruin me. I started visiting the house, under the pretense of friendship, just to make sure she was safe. One night, I arrived to find her terrified, her dress torn, blood on her lip. She told me he'd tried to kill her. In the struggle, he fell, hit his head on the hearth. He died instantly." Juliana's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, Tristan." He shook his head, pain etched in every line of his face. "She was in shock. She begged me to help her. I made it look like an accident. I told the staff what to say. I did what I had to do to protect her. She left London soon after, to have the child in peace. Only her household and I know the truth. Victor, he never knew. She didn't want him to see her as ruined, or to carry her shame." He looked at Juliana, his eyes haunted. "I've carried that secret for years. I've let people believe the worst of me, because it was safer for her. I suppose I've let them believe the worst of me in many things. It's easier than trying to explain." She reached up, cupping his cheek, her touch gentle. "You're not the man they say you are, Tristan. You're better than any of them know." He closed his eyes, leaning into her hand. "I wish I could believe that. I've made so many mistakes, Juliana. I've hurt people, disappointed everyone who ever expected anything of me. Sometimes I think I'm cursed to ruin everything I touch." She shook her head, her voice fierce. "You're not cursed. You're human. You've made mistakes, but you've also done so much good. You've brought happiness into my life, Tristan. You've made me feel seen and cherished and alive." He opened his eyes, searching hers. "You make me want to be better. You make me wish I could stay in this moment forever." She smiled through her tears, her heart aching with love and fear. "Then stay, just for tonight." He drew her into his arms, and their lips met in a kiss that was both desperate and tender. a promise, and a plea. The world fell away, leaving only the two of them, the warmth of their bodies, the thrum of their hearts. They kissed again and again, each touch more urgent, more reverent, as if trying to memorize the shape of happiness. But as their passion grew, Tristan pulled back, his breath ragged, his forehead pressed to hers. Juliana, if we go any further, I won't be able to stop. And I must, not tonight. I want you, but not like this. Not when I might not. He broke off, swallowing hard. She nodded, her cheeks flushed, her eyes shining with understanding. I know. I trust you. He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. You make it very difficult to be honorable, you know. She laughed softly, the sound muffled against his chest. I'm glad. They lay together on the bed, fully clothed, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. They spoke in whispers, sharing hopes and fears, dreams and regrets. Juliana drifted into sleep, her hand curled in his, her breath warm against his neck. Tristan watched her, memorizing the curve of her cheek, the softness of her lips, the way she looked at peace in his arms. He pressed a kiss to her hair, whispering words she would never hear. I love you, Juliana. I wish I could stay. He lay there for a long time, holding her close, wishing the night would never end. But as the first faint light of dawn crept through the curtains, he knew he had to go. Gently he disentangled himself from her embrace, careful not to wake her. He stood for a moment, watching her sleep, his heart full to bursting with longing and regret and a love he had never dared to name. He pressed a final, lingering kiss to her hair, memorizing the peace on her face, the softness of her breath. Then, with one last look, he slipped out onto the balcony, closing the window behind him, and disappeared into the fading shadows, leaving Juliana safe and dreaming, blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to break. The house remained silent, the world suspended in that fragile hour before dawn as Juliana slept on. Her dreams still filled with the warmth of his arms and the promise of a love she had only just begun to understand. Chapter 14. The first rays of dawn crept through Juliana's curtains, painting her room in a gentle golden light. She stirred, stretching languidly, the memory of Tristan's arms around her still lingering in her dreams. For a moment, she lay in the warmth of the bed, a soft smile on her lips, before she realized she was alone. The pillow beside her was cool, the room silent, save for the distant sounds of the household beginning to stir. She sat up, glancing around, half expecting to see Tristan's shadow at the window. But he was gone, vanished as quietly as he had come. She felt a pang of disappointment, but told herself not to be foolish. He had always been a man of secrets and shadows. Pulling on her dressing gown, Juliana padded softly down the corridor, intent on finding a cup of tea to steady her nerves. As she descended the stairs, she heard the low murmur of voices from the servants' hall. She paused, hidden by the banister, and listened. Said they're meeting at Hyde Park at dawn, pistols and all, one footman whispered, his eyes wide. Lord Ashbourne and Lord Blackwood, can you imagine? Over a lady, they say. The whole club was talking about it last night. Foolishness, the housekeeper muttered, shaking her head. Men and their pride. Someone's bound to get hurt. Juliana's heart lurched. She stepped into the room, her voice trembling. What did you say? Who is dueling? The servants fell silent, eyes wide with shock at her sudden appearance. The footman stammered, It's Lord Ashbourne, miss. And Lord Blackwood. They're to meet at Hyde Park this morning. It's all over the club. Juliana's blood ran cold. She pressed a hand to her mouth, struggling to breathe. When? Where exactly? The housekeeper, seeing the panic in her eyes, relented. At the north meadow, just past the Serpentine. At sunrise, miss. But you mustn't. But Juliana was already running, her mind racing. She flew up the stairs, calling for her maid, demanding her riding habit and boots. Within minutes, she was dressed, her hair hastily pinned beneath her hat. She barely paused to scribble a note for her mother before she was out the door, mounting her horse with trembling hands. The ride to Hyde Park was a blur, the city still half asleep as she galloped through the empty streets. Her heart pounded with every hoofbeat, fear and fury warring within her. She would not let them destroy each other, not for pride, not for her. The morning air in Hyde Park was crisp, the grass still silvered with dew. Tristan stood at the edge of the meadow, his coat buttoned tight against the chill, his face pale but resolute. Beside him stood his second, Lord Pembroke, a loyal friend who had seen him through darker nights than this. Across the field, Victor waited, his jaw set, his eyes cold with determination. His own second, a distant cousin, hovered anxiously at his side, glancing nervously at the pistols laid out on a velvet cloth. The seconds conferred, measuring out the paces, loading the weapons with solemn efficiency. The ritual was as old as honor itself, and just as unforgiving. Victor broke the silence first, his voice low and bitter. You always did have a talent for making a spectacle, Ashbourne. Even now you can't help but draw a crowd. Tristan's lips twisted in a wry smile. I never wanted this, Victor. But I won't run from it either. Victor's eyes flashed. You never wanted this? You never wanted Arabella either, I suppose? Or Juliana? You take what you want and leave nothing but ruin behind. Tristan's expression hardened. If you had been a better friend to Arabella, you would have known the truth. You would have seen what she suffered. But you were too busy nursing your own pride to see her pain. Victor's fists clenched, his voice shaking. Don't you dare speak to me of her pain. You have no right. Tristan met his gaze, unflinching. No, Victor. I have every right. I was there when she needed someone. Where were you? The seconds called them to their marks, the tension in the air thick enough to choke. The pistols were handed over, cold and heavy in their hands. 10 paces, Lord Pembroke intoned. Turn and fire on my count. Tristan's heart pounded, but his hand was steady. He glanced at Victor, saw the anger and hurt warring in his eyes, and felt a pang of regret. This was not how it was meant to end. They took their positions, backs to each other, the world narrowing to the sound of their own breathing. 1, 2, 3. A sudden cry shattered the silence. Tristan! Stop! He turned, instinctively, at the sound of Juliana's voice. She was riding hard across the meadow, her hair streaming behind her, her face pale with fear. Victor, seeing Tristan's distraction, raised his pistol and fired, the shot echoing across the field. Tristan staggered, a bloom of red spreading across his side, and fell to the ground. Juliana leapt from her horse, running to his side, heedless of the danger. She cradled Tristan's head in her lap, her hands slick with blood. Lord Pembroke knelt beside her, his face grim. We must get him home. Quickly. Victor stood rooted to the spot, his pistol still raised, his face ashen. He stared at the blood on the grass, at Juliana's tear-streaked face, at the man he'd just shot. For a moment, he seemed unable to move, his chest heaving with ragged breaths. Juliana looked up at him, her voice fierce and trembling. You fool! You don't know what you've done. Lady Arabella was never Tristan's lover. Her husband abused her. He nearly killed her. Tristan saved her life, helped her escape. The child was her husband's, not his. You let your pride blind you to the truth. Victor's mouth opened, but no words came. He shook his head, as if trying to deny what he'd heard, his eyes wild with confusion and disbelief. No, you're lying. He never told me. Arabella would have... His voice broke, and he looked at Tristan, the enormity of what he'd done finally settling on his shoulders. He dropped the pistol, his hands shaking. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know. He took a stumbling step forward as if to help, but Juliana's glare stopped him cold. Go, she said, her voice low and cold. You've done enough. Victor's second touched his arm, guiding him away. Victor resisted at first, looking back at Tristan, then at Juliana, his face crumpling with guilt and regret. Tell him I'm sorry, he whispered. But Juliana had already turned her attention back to Tristan, her hands pressing desperately against the wound. Lord Pembroke and the seconds lifted Tristan as gently as they could, carrying him to the waiting carriage. Juliana climbed in beside him, refusing to let go of his hand, her voice a constant, urgent whisper in the dim interior. Stay with me, Tristan. Please, just hold on. We're almost there. Please. But Tristan's eyes fluttered, his skin growing cold and clammy. The world seemed to tilt and darken around him. Juliana felt his grip weaken, panic rising in her chest. Tristan! Tristan, look at me. Please, don't leave me. But his eyes closed, his head lolling against her shoulder as the carriage rattled through the streets. Juliana pressed her hand to his cheek, willing him to wake, to fight, to stay. When they reached Tristan's house, the doctor was already waiting, summoned by Lord Pembroke's quick thinking. They carried Tristan inside, Juliana never leaving his side, her dress stained with his blood, her heart pounding with terror. The doctor worked quickly, issuing orders, but Juliana barely heard him. She knelt at Tristan's side, holding his limp hand, her tears falling unchecked. Please, she whispered, her voice breaking. Please, don't take him from me. Not now. Not when I've just found him. The house was filled with the frantic energy of crisis, servants rushing, voices raised, the sharp scent of spirits and blood. Juliana remained at Tristan's side, her love and fear the only things anchoring her in the chaos. As the day wore on and the crisis deepened, Juliana knew that nothing would ever be the same. The duel had changed everything, had stripped away the lies and left only the truth, raw and undeniable. Chapter 15. The day passed in a blur of anxious waiting. The doctor moved quietly through Tristan's bedchamber, his hands steady and sure as he finished binding the wound and cleaning away the blood. Juliana hovered nearby, her heart in her throat, watching every movement, every subtle shift in Tristan's breathing. Lord Pembroke stood at the window, arms folded, his face drawn with worry. At last, the doctor straightened, wiping his hands on a cloth. The bleeding has stopped, he said quietly. I've done all I can for now. The ball passed cleanly through, which is a mercy. But he's lost a great deal of blood, and the fever may yet take hold. We must wait and see. Juliana nodded, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Thank you, Doctor. Truly. He gave her a measured look, as if weighing the impropriety of her presence, but said nothing. Lord Pembroke, ever the gentleman, offered her a reassuring smile. You should rest, Miss Montrose. We'll keep watch. But Juliana shook her head. I'm not leaving him. Not tonight. She sent word to her parents, a brief note explaining that she was with a friend in need and would return as soon as she was able. It was a risk. If anyone discovered she had spent the night in a bachelor's house, her reputation would be in tatters. But she could not bring herself to care. Tristan needed her, and that was all that mattered. As evening fell, the house grew quiet. The servants moved softly, aware of the gravity of the situation and the scandal that might erupt if word spread. But the staff was loyal, and no one would speak of what they saw. Juliana sat at Tristan's bedside, a cool cloth in her hand, dabbing gently at his brow. His skin was hot to the touch, his face flushed with fever. She whispered soothing words, hoping to anchor him to the present, to keep him from drifting too far into the shadows of his mind. Hours passed. The fire burned low, casting flickering patterns on the walls. Lord Pembroke dozed in a chair by the hearth, the doctor nearby, ready should he be needed. Juliana remained vigilant, her eyes never leaving Tristan's face. Sometime after midnight, Tristan's eyes fluttered open, but his gaze was unfocused. Juliana leaned in, her voice soft and steady. "Tristan, can you hear me? The doctor says you'll be all right." He murmured something incoherent, his words slurred. Juliana's heart raced with concern. "Tristan, what is it? What's wrong?" His eyes drifted shut again, but his lips kept moving. Shouldn't have asked." Juliana's brow furrowed. What was he talking about? She took his hand, hoping to calm him. "You're safe now, Tristan. You're going to be okay." Tristan's grip on her hand tightened, his fingers digging into her skin. "The beach. I wanted to see the beach." Juliana's heart ached at the pain in his voice. She didn't understand what he was trying to say, but she knew he was struggling with something deep-seated. As the night wore on, Tristan's words became more disjointed. He spoke of storms and carriages, of guilt and regret. Juliana listened intently, her mind racing with possibilities. She sensed that Tristan's injury had uncovered a deep wound, one that went far beyond his physical pain. At one point, his body trembled with chills, and Juliana pressed her palm to his forehead, alarmed by the heat radiating from his skin. She called for the doctor, who hurried in, his face grave as he examined Tristan. "The fever's set in," he said, voice low. "We must do what we can to bring it down. Cool compresses, fresh air, and laudanum for the pain. I'll stay close." Juliana worked tirelessly, changing the cloths, coaxing Tristan to sip water when he was able, whispering words of comfort through his delirium. She barely noticed the hours slipping by, her world narrowed to the rise and fall of his chest, the feverish mutterings that haunted his sleep. Sometimes his words were little more than fragments. "Mother, Father, I'm sorry. The carriage, the storm." But each one cut Juliana to the quick. She stroked his hair, her voice a gentle anchor. "You're safe, Tristan. You're not alone. I'm here." At one point, Tristan's eyes snapped open, and he gazed up at Juliana with a look of raw anguish. "It's my fault," he whispered, his voice barely audible. I should have protected them." Juliana's heart broke for him. She wanted to ask him what he meant, but she knew this wasn't the time. Instead, she stroked his hair, trying to offer what little comfort she could. "You're safe now, Tristan. You're not alone." As the night wore on, Tristan's words became less frequent, and he drifted in and out of consciousness. Juliana stayed by his side, holding his hand, and trying to make sense of the fragments he'd shared. She knew that Tristan was hurting, and she was determined to be there for him, even if she didn't fully understand the depth of his pain. The fever broke just before dawn. Juliana felt the change in him, a loosening of the tension in his body, a softening of his breath. She pressed a cool cloth to his brow, relief flooding her as his skin cooled beneath her touch. Exhausted, she rested her head on the edge of the bed, her hand still clasped in his. The first light of morning crept through the curtains, painting the room in a gentle glow. The doctor entered quietly, checking Tristan's pulse and nodding with satisfaction. "He's out of danger now. He needs rest, and so do you, Miss Montrose." Lord Pembroke approached, his voice kind but firm. "Juliana, you must go home. Your parents will be worried sick, and you need sleep. Tristan will be well looked after, I promise. You can return once you've had some rest." Juliana hesitated, torn between duty and devotion. She looked down at Tristan, now sleeping soundly, his face peaceful at last. She brushed a stray lock of hair from his forehead, her heart full of gratitude and hope. "I'll come back as soon as I can," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Lord Pembroke offered his arm, and Juliana allowed herself to be led from the room, casting one last, lingering glance at Tristan before the door closed softly behind her. As she stepped outside, the early morning air was cool and bracing, carrying with it the promise of a new day. Juliana drew a steadying breath, her heart full of gratitude and hope, but also a new, deeper understanding of the man she loved. She knew she would return as soon as she could, but for now, she had done all she could. With one last look back at the house, Juliana gathered her resolve and set off for home. The memory of Tristan's haunted words echoing in her mind, and the certainty growing in her heart that she would stand by him no matter what storms might come. Chapter 16. The city was just waking as Juliana's carriage turned onto the familiar street, the Montrose townhouse standing dignified and serene in the pale morning light. She felt the weight of exhaustion in her bones, her mind still reeling from the night's ordeal. Her dress was stiff with dried blood, her hair tangled and windblown, her gloves stained and torn. She barely recognized herself as the carriage drew to a halt and the footman hurried to open the door. The butler's eyes widened as he took in her appearance. "Miss Montrose, are you injured?" Juliana shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. "No, not me. Please, I must see my parents at once." He ushered her inside, and the hush of the entry hall was quickly broken by the hurried footsteps of her mother and father. Lady Montrose, still in her morning wrapper, gasped at the sight of her daughter. "Juliana, what on earth—" Her father, Lord Montrose, was at her side in an instant, his face pale with alarm. "Where have you been? What's happened to you?" Juliana's composure nearly broke at the concern in their voices. She steadied herself, drawing a deep breath. "Please, let us go to the drawing room. There is much I must tell you, and I would rather not do it here." Her parents exchanged a look, worry, confusion, a flicker of fear, before following her into the drawing room. The room was flooded with gentle morning light, the scent of fresh flowers mingling with the faint tang of blood on Juliana's dress. Lady Montrose pressed a handkerchief to her lips, her eyes never leaving her daughter's face. Juliana sat, her hands trembling in her lap. For a moment, she could not speak. The words seemed too heavy, too tangled. But her parents waited, and she owed them the truth. "I know I look a fright," she began, her voice unsteady. "But I am not hurt. The blood is not mine. Her mother let out a shaky breath. Thank heavens. But whose is it, Juliana? What has happened? Juliana looked down at her hands, then up at her parents, her gaze steady. It's a long story. I beg you to listen to all of it before you judge. She began with Victor's visit, recounting his accusations about Tristan and Lady Arabella. She described her own doubts, her decision to visit Lady Arabella's house, and the truth she had learned from the servants, the abuse, the pregnancy, the desperate escape. She told them of the duel, her frantic ride to Hyde Park, the moment Victor's bullet struck Tristan, and the long, harrowing night at his bedside. Her parents listened in stunned silence, their faces shifting from shock to disbelief to sorrow as the story unfolded. Lady Montrose's hand trembled as she reached for her daughters, while Lord Montrose's jaw tightened, his eyes dark with concern. "And Tristan?" Lady Montrose asked softly. "Is he—" Juliana's voice broke. "He's alive. The doctor says he will recover, but it was very close. I stayed with him through the night. I couldn't leave him, not after everything." There was a long silence. Her father cleared his throat, his voice rough. "You realize, Juliana, what a scandal this could become. If word spreads that you spent the night in Lord Ashbourne's house—" "I know," Juliana said quietly. "But I couldn't abandon him. Not after what he's done for others and for me. I love him, Papa. I think I have for some time." Her mother squeezed her hand, her own composure wavering. "Oh, my dear girl, you've always had a tender heart. But are you certain? After all that's happened?" Juliana nodded, her voice steady. "I am. I know his reputation, but I also know the truth. He's not the man society believes him to be. He's kind and brave, and he's carried burdens no one should have to bear. I saw it last night, in the things he said when he was feverish. He's haunted by his past, but he's not a villain. He's a good man." Her father was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the window. At last, he spoke, his tone softer than she expected. "I misjudged him. I believed the worst, as so many have. But if what you say is true, if he risked everything to protect Lady Arabella and you, then perhaps I owe him an apology." Lady Montrose dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. "And Victor? I can hardly believe he would act so rashly. He always seemed so proper." Juliana's lips trembled. "He let his pride blind him. He couldn't see past his own pain. I pity him, but I can't forgive what he did." Her father nodded, his expression grave. "We will keep this within the family. No one need know the details. Your reputation will be protected, as will Lord Ashbourne's. But you must rest now, Juliana. You've been through more than enough." Juliana allowed herself to be led upstairs, her mother's arm around her shoulders. As she changed out of her ruined dress and slipped between the cool sheets of her own bed, she felt a strange sense of peace. The truth was out, and her parents, shocked though they were, had listened. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to hope. As she drifted into sleep, Juliana's thoughts lingered on Tristan, on his strength, his pain, and the love she had finally found the courage to claim. Whatever storms might come, she knew she would face them with her heart unguarded, and her family, at last, by her side. Chapter 17. The world returned to Tristan in fragments. The muted light of late morning, the faint scent of lavender, the gentle creak of a chair beside his bed. For a moment, he was adrift, uncertain of where, or even who, he was. Then the pain in his side flared, sharp and insistent, and memory rushed back. The duel, the gunshot, Juliana's voice calling his name. He tried to sit up, but the movement sent a bolt of agony through his body. He gasped, a low, involuntary sound escaping his lips. Juliana startled awake, her head snapping up from where it had rested on her folded arms. She was at his side in an instant, her eyes wide with concern and relief. "Tristan, you mustn't move. The doctor said you're to stay in bed." He managed a weak, lopsided smile, though his brow was beaded with sweat. "I suppose I should be grateful to be in bed at all." She pressed a cool hand to his forehead, her touch gentle and familiar. "You gave us all quite a fright. Do you remember what happened?" Tristan frowned, his memory hazy. "I remember the club, Victor's face, the duel. And then nothing, just darkness and pain." Juliana sat on the edge of the bed, her voice soft but steady. "You were shot. Victor was angry, and you were distracted. I arrived just as it happened. We got you home, and the doctor worked through the night. You had a fever, Tristan. You said things about your parents, about the past. But you don't have to talk about it if you don't want to." He was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the ceiling. The room was quiet, the only sound the distant clatter of a carriage in the street below. At last, he spoke, his voice low and uncertain. "I think I do want to talk about it. I've never told anyone, not even Pembroke. But you deserve to know." Juliana took his hand, her touch warm and reassuring. "I'm here. You can tell me anything." He closed his eyes, gathering his thoughts. "It was my birthday. I must have been 8, maybe 9. I'd been begging my parents to take me to the seaside. I'd read stories about the ocean, how vast it was, how the waves crashed against the shore. I wanted to see it for myself. I wouldn't let it go. I pestered them for weeks, and finally they agreed." He paused, his breath catching. "We set out early, the 3 of us in the carriage. I remember how excited I was, how I couldn't sit still. But halfway there, a storm rolled in, sudden and fierce. The road flooded, and the carriage was swept away. I remember the water, the panic, my mother's scream. When I woke, they were gone. I was the only one who survived." Juliana's eyes filled with tears. She squeezed his hand, her voice trembling. "Oh, Tristan." He shook his head, his jaw tight. If I hadn't asked, if I hadn't been so persistent, they'd still be alive. I've carried that guilt my whole life. I thought if I could just be good enough, brave enough, maybe I could make up for it. But I never could." Juliana leaned closer, her voice fierce with conviction. "Tristan, it wasn't your fault. You were a child. You couldn't have known what would happen. Your parents loved you. They wanted to make you happy. The storm was a tragedy, but it wasn't your doing. You have to let go of the blame." He looked at her, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "I don't know if I can." She brushed a lock of hair from his forehead, her touch gentle. "You can. And you're not alone anymore. I love you, Tristan. I have for some time." He stared at her, stunned, as if he couldn't quite believe what he'd heard. Then, slowly, a smile broke through the pain. "You love me?" She nodded, her own smile trembling. "I do, with all my heart." He reached for her hand, his grip weak but determined. "I love you, Juliana. I think I've loved you from the moment I first saw you." She bent and kissed him, a soft, lingering touch that spoke of hope and healing. For the first time in years, Tristan felt the weight of his grief begin to lift, replaced by something bright and new. The days that followed were filled with quiet joy. Juliana visited every afternoon, reading to him from his favorite books, bringing news from the outside world, and filling the house with laughter. She coaxed him to take short walks in the garden, supporting him as he regained his strength. Lord Pembroke often joined them, his dry wit a welcome distraction, and even the servants seemed to move with lighter steps. Tristan's recovery was slow but steady. The wound healed, the pain faded, and the shadows that had haunted him for so long began to recede. He found himself looking forward to each new day, to the sound of Juliana's voice, to the warmth of her hand in his. One afternoon, as the sun slanted through the windows and Juliana read aloud from a novel, a knock sounded at the door. Lord Pembroke entered, his expression unusually serious. "You have a visitor, Ashbourne. Lord Blackwood." Juliana's hand stilled on the page, her heart leaping with apprehension. Tristan nodded, his face calm but wary. "Show him in." Victor entered quietly, his posture stiff, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion and regret. He paused just inside the door, his gaze flickering between Tristan and Juliana. For a moment, he seemed unable to speak, the weight of all that had passed pressing down on him. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said at last, his voice subdued. Tristan shook his head, gesturing to a chair. "Not at all, Victor. Please, sit." Victor hesitated, then crossed the room and sat, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. The silence that followed was thick with things unsaid. Juliana watched him, her heart pounding, uncertain what to expect. Victor looked down, gathering himself. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "I have come to apologize, to both of you. I have spent these last days in a kind of torment, unable to sleep, unable to think of anything but what I have done. I went to see Lady Arabella. I needed to hear the truth from her own lips, not just the stories I told myself." He looked up, meeting Tristan's gaze directly. "She told me everything, about her husband, about the fear she lived in, about how you helped her. I realize now how wrong I was. I let my pride and jealousy blind me. I wanted to hurt you, Tristan, because I believed you had stolen her from me. And when I saw you with Juliana, I let that same bitterness take hold. I convinced myself I was protecting her, but the truth is, I wanted to take her from you, as I believed you had taken Arabella from me." He turned to Juliana, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "I am so sorry, Juliana. I used you, not out of love, but out of spite. You deserved better than that. You deserved honesty, and I gave you only my wounded pride." Juliana's expression softened, her voice gentle but steady. "Thank you for telling us the truth, Victor. I hope you can forgive yourself, as we forgive you." Victor's shoulders sagged, the tension draining from him. He looked back at Tristan, his voice trembling. "I nearly destroyed you, old friend. I let anger and grief rule me, and I cannot undo what I've done. But I am truly sorry. I hope, in time, you can find it in your heart to forgive me." Tristan was silent for a long moment, searching Victor's face. At last he spoke, his voice quiet but sincere. "We have both been haunted by the past, Victor. I forgive you. Let us not let old wounds fester any longer." Victor nodded, relief and sorrow mingling in his expression. He stood, and after a moment's hesitation, extended his hand. Tristan took it, the gesture sealing a fragile but genuine truce. Victor lingered at the door, looking back at them both. "I wish you happiness, both of you. You have earned it." He left quietly, the door closing softly behind him. The room felt lighter, as if a storm had finally passed. Juliana returned to Tristan's side, her heart full of hope for the future. The wounds of the past had not vanished, but they had begun to heal, together, with forgiveness and love. Chapter 18. The city was alive with the promise of spring, the air fresh and tinged with the scent of new blossoms. Tristan Ashbourne, nearly recovered from his wound, stood at the window of his study, watching the world move on outside. The pain in his side was now a dull ache, a reminder of how close he had come to losing everything. Yet as he flexed his hand and felt the strength returning to his body, he was aware of a new sense of purpose, a clarity that had eluded him for years. He had spent the past weeks in quiet reflection, his days filled with Juliana's laughter, her gentle touch, and the steady, healing rhythm of her presence. She had seen him at his worst and had not turned away. She had listened to his confessions, held his hand through fever and pain, and brought light into the darkest corners of his soul. He knew, with a certainty that surprised him, that he could not imagine a future without her. It was this certainty that led him, one bright morning, to the Montrose townhouse. He dressed with care, choosing a dark blue coat and a crisp white cravat, his movements deliberate and unhurried. He was not a boy seeking approval, but a man prepared to lay his heart bare. The butler greeted him with a respectful nod and ushered him into the drawing-room. Lord and Lady Montrose soon entered, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and guarded hope. Lady Montrose, ever gracious, gestured for him to sit, but Tristan remained standing, his posture formal but composed. "My lord, my lady," he began, his voice steady, "I have come to ask for your daughter's hand in marriage." There was a moment of silence, the weight of tradition and expectation settling over the room. Lord Montrose regarded him with a measured gaze, his hands folded before him. "You have chosen a bold course, Lord Ashbourne. I trust you understand what you are asking." Tristan met his gaze without flinching. "I do, sir. I am not blind to my past, nor to the reputation that follows me. But I have changed. Your daughter has been the catalyst for that change. She has shown me what it means to be truly known and truly loved. I would spend my life making her happy, if you will allow it." Lady Montrose's eyes softened, a gentle smile curving her lips. "We have seen the change in you, Lord Ashbourne, and we have seen how our daughter looks at you. She is not easily swayed, nor is she blind to a man's faults. If she loves you, it is because you have earned it." Lord Montrose's stern expression eased, and he nodded. "You have our blessing, Ashbourne. But know this, if you ever give us cause to regret it, you will answer to me." Tristan inclined his head, gratitude and relief evident in his eyes. "Thank you, sir. I give you my word. I will cherish her always." Lady Montrose rose and took his hand, her eyes shining. "Welcome to the family, Tristan." He left the Montrose house with his heart soaring, the world brighter than it had ever seemed. He could not wait to see Juliana, to tell her what he had done, to ask her the question that had lived in his heart for so long. That night, the Montrose house was quiet. The city beyond the windows hushed beneath a blanket of stars. Juliana sat at her dressing table, brushing out her hair, her thoughts drifting to Tristan as they so often did. She had seen him earlier that day, walking in the garden, his colour returning, his smile more certain. She wondered what he was thinking, what plans he might be making. A soft tap at her window startled her from her reverie. She turned, her heart leaping as she saw Tristan's familiar silhouette on the balcony. She hurried to let him in, her cheeks flushed with excitement and surprise. Tristan, what are you doing here? You know if anyone finds you. He silenced her with a smile, his eyes alight with mischief and something deeper, more earnest. I had to see you. I couldn't wait another day. She closed the window behind him, her heart racing. Is everything all right? He took her hands in his, drawing her close. Everything is more than all right. I went to see your parents today. I asked for your hand, Juliana. They gave me their blessing. Her breath caught, joy and disbelief mingling in her eyes. You did? He nodded, his voice soft and reverent. I love you, Juliana. I have loved you from the moment I first saw you, and every day since. You are my heart, my hope, my future. Will you marry me? Tears sprang to her eyes, her hands trembling in his. Yes, Tristan. Yes, 1,000 times, yes. He pulled her into his arms, their lips meeting in a kiss that was fierce and tender, full of all the longing and promise they had carried for so long. The world fell away, leaving only the two of them, the heat of their embrace, the certainty of their love. As their passion grew, Tristan pulled back, his breath ragged, his forehead pressed to hers. Juliana, I want you more than I can say. But this time, I want to do things right. I want to wait until you are truly mine. She smiled, her heart full to bursting. You are already mine, Tristan, but I understand. He kissed her again, softer this time, lingering as if to memorize the moment. Then, with a reluctant sigh, he slipped away, leaving her standing in the moonlight, her heart soaring. As he disappeared into the night, Juliana pressed her fingers to her lips, laughter and tears mingling in her eyes. She felt like the luckiest girl in the world, and she knew with absolute certainty that her happiness was only just beginning. Chapter 20. The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a flurry of anticipation and gentle chaos. The Montrose townhouse was transformed by the bustle of preparations. Seamstresses arriving with bolts of ivory silk, florists filling the halls with the scent of roses and orange blossom, and footmen carrying in parcels and ribbons and mysterious boxes. Juliana found herself swept along by the tide, her days filled with fittings, lists, and the laughter of her mother and sisters as they debated every detail, from the colour of the ribbons to the arrangement of the bouquets. Tristan, for his part, was a steady presence amid the whirlwind. He attended to the business of his estate, met with the vicar, and endured the good-natured ribbing of Lord Pembroke, who insisted on planning a modest but raucous bachelor supper. Yet whenever he could, Tristan found his way to Juliana's side, stealing moments in the garden, sharing quiet conversations in the library, or simply holding her hand beneath the table at family dinners. Each glance, each touch was a promise. Soon they would be together, truly and forever. The city seemed to celebrate with them. Invitations were sent, and the responses poured in, some from friends, some from those who had once whispered about Tristan's reputation, but now spoke only of his transformation. Even Lady Arabella sent a note of congratulations, her words warm and sincere. Victor, too, called on them, his manner changed, gentler, more thoughtful. He offered his best wishes, and though a shadow of regret lingered in his eyes, it was clear he had found a measure of peace. The night before the wedding, Juliana sat in her childhood room, the house quiet around her. Her mother came to sit beside her, brushing a stray curl from her brow. "Are you nervous, my darling?" Juliana smiled, her heart full. "Not nervous, just ready. I never imagined I could be this happy." Lady Montrose pressed a kiss to her forehead. "You have chosen well, Juliana. I have never seen you so certain or so loved." Juliana drifted to sleep with her mother's words in her heart, dreaming of sunlight and laughter, and Tristan's arms around her. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, the sky a perfect blue. The church was filled with the scent of fresh flowers, sunlight streaming through the stained glass to paint the pews in jewel tones. Guests arrived in a flutter of silks and laughter, the air alive with excitement. Juliana stood in the antechamber, her gown a vision of soft ivory, her veil trailing like mist behind her. Her father took her arm, his eyes suspiciously bright. "You are radiant, my dear. Your mother and I are so proud." The doors opened, and the music swelled. Juliana walked down the aisle, her heart pounding, her gaze fixed on Tristan. He stood at the altar, tall and composed, his eyes never leaving hers. In that moment, the world fell away. There was only the two of them, the promise of forever shimmering between them. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. Vows were spoken, hands joined, rings exchanged. When the vicar pronounced them husband and wife, Tristan lifted Juliana's veil and kissed her, gentle and reverent, as the congregation erupted in applause. The celebration that followed was a blur of joy, dancing, laughter, toasts, and tears. Lord Pembroke delivered a speech that had the entire room in stitches, while Lady Montrose wept openly, dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Even Victor smiled, raising his glass in a silent salute to the couple. As the sun set and the guests departed, Tristan and Juliana slipped away, their carriage waiting to carry them to the country estate that would be their first home together. The journey was quiet, the air thick with anticipation and the soft glow of lanterns flickering through the windows. Their bedchamber was awash in candlelight, the fire casting golden shadows on the walls. Juliana stood by the window, her heart fluttering as she heard Tristan close the door behind him. He crossed the room in a few long strides, his eyes dark with longing and love. He reached for her, his hands gentle as he drew her close. "Are you afraid?" he whispered, his breath warm against her ear. She shook her head, her voice trembling with anticipation. "Not with you." He kissed her then, slow and deep, his hands threading through her hair. The world narrowed to the press of his body, the heat of his skin, the steady thrum of his heartbeat beneath her palm. He traced the line of her jaw, the curve of her neck, his touch reverent and sure. Juliana's breath caught as he unfastened the tiny buttons at the back of her gown, his fingers lingering on her bare skin. She shivered, not from cold, but from the exquisite thrill of being so wholly seen, so wholly loved. Tristan's lips found hers again, hungry now, his restraint slipping as desire flared between them. He lifted her into his arms, carrying her to the bed, their laughter mingling with whispered promises. The sheets were cool against her skin, but his body was warm, his touch a balm to every ache and longing she had ever known. He worshipped her with his hands, his mouth, his whispered words, each caress a vow, each kiss a benediction. Their bodies moved together, slow at first, then urgent, the years of longing and hope and heartache melting away in the heat of their union. Juliana clung to him, her senses awash in sensation, the taste of his skin, the roughness of his jaw, the way he murmured her name as if it were a prayer. As passion crested, Tristan's control faltered. He pressed his forehead to hers, his voice ragged. "I love you, Juliana. I will love you all my life." She answered with a kiss, fierce and sweet, her heart overflowing. The world dissolved into light and heat and the certainty of belonging. and as they tumbled together into bliss, the night wrapped them in its gentle embrace. In the days and years that followed, their love only deepened. The scandals and sorrows of the past faded, replaced by laughter, friendship, and the quiet joy of shared mornings and whispered secrets. Tristan became a devoted husband. His rakish reputation transformed into that of a man admired for his loyalty and kindness. Juliana flourished, her spirit undimmed, her heart ever open. Victor found his own peace, forging a new path, and in time, a new love. Lady Arabella, too, found happiness, her story a quiet testament to the power of second chances. The Montrose family grew, their home filled with the laughter of children and the warmth of old friends. And through it all, Tristan and Juliana remained each other's anchor, their love a beacon, their happiness hard won, and all the sweeter for it. On quiet evenings, they would walk together in the garden, hand in hand, grateful for the journey that had brought them to this place, to this moment, to each other. Their story, once marked by pain and longing, became a tale of hope, forgiveness, and the enduring power of love, a love that, at last, had found its forever, the end. Thank you so much for joining us on Juliana and Tristan's unforgettable journey to love and healing. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and subscribe to Romance Haven Audiobooks. Your support helps us bring more heartwarming tales to life, and we'd love to hear your thoughts or suggestions for future stories. Romance Haven Audiobooks. Your escape into romance awaits.